Check, check. All right, so I think we're ready to begin. Welcome to the Ylva Fine Arts Center here on the campus of Bethany Lutheran College, Mankato, Minnesota, United States of America. Planet Earth, Milky Way. Yes. We're trying some things with this show. You might, if you're used to visiting the gallery to see art here, you might be wondering how this goes and what it's all about. The work that we see in the gallery is the work of 5-ish quilters, artists. Maybe I'll explain later why that's a decimal. And to kick off the evening, we've got definitely 5 students who have been asked to react to individual pieces selected to include each quilter represented. So we have students who will react to a quilt/quilter. We'll start off the evening that way. I'll pass the microphone around, and if you can turn your attention each time, try to find out who's talking, and they're standing next to the quilt that they're responding to. So it'll be a little interactive. Balcony may struggle at this moment. Okay? And then after that, we'll have everybody join each other. It looks like the front table of a wedding. Here we go, over on this end.
Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Rigg, and I'm reacting to this piece right here, Dandelions in the Wind by Teri Polson. The piece I decided to write is a reaction on the themes of love and service, and it's called Grow Where You Aren't Planted. What is a weed? We could probably make a list a mile long. Thistles, burrs, black nightshade, ironweed. But corn plants are weeds if they sprout up in a soybean field. Grass is a weed if it grows in your garden. It seems that the plant itself is much less important to us than where we find it. As soon as it grows where it's not wanted, a plant becomes a weed. How many times have we been told, grow where you're planted? It's meant to be encouraging. Accept your circumstances and do your best to thrive with what you've been given. But this statement also suggests complacency. It suggests you have no business stepping outside of where you've been planted. No business serving those even one step away from you. One step out of your comfort zone. What if we didn't grow within our circumstances? What if we grew despite them? An expert in the law once asked Jesus, "Lord, who is my neighbor?" Did Jesus say, your family, those in your circle, those whom you want to serve? Sometimes we assume that we know best who our neighbor is. We write our own rules about who receives our love. God has planted me right here. I'll serve my neighbor, but I'll just have to do my best with whatever is within my reach. Jesus turns this logic around. Lord, who is my neighbor? Not just those you want to serve, not those near you or those who deserve it, everyone. Lord, where am I planted? Not just where you want to be, not in your comfort zone, not where you think you are stuck, everywhere. Dandelions are weeds, but is that only because they grow where they aren't planted? They bloom, they give refuge to pollinators, they prevent soil erosion. The entire plant is edible, literally medicinal. The dandelion's status as a weed says more about its surroundings than its own intrinsic value, its created purpose. If we spread beauty and kindness everywhere, the world might hate it, but that doesn't mean we aren't called to do it anyway. Your seeds will fly into the wind of God's design and sprout up where you don't expect. You weren't planted there, but you're there now. Not every opportunity to serve is obvious, but that's the point. We are called to serve with purpose, to seek out new avenues. We are called to create beauty deliberately, to be kind with intentionality, to grow where we aren't planted.
My name is Claire Marcus, and I am analyzing this quilt, which is called A Soldier's Memory by Koleesa Dirksen. It's a little long-winded, so bear with me. About a week ago, when Jason began opening up the totes of quilts and spreading them around the YFAC for this art show, I welcomed the chance to take a look around, and I immediately fell in love with the warmth and precision we were surrounded by, a craft that we don't take the time to appreciate often enough, that stands for warmth and connection, all hanging upon the walls we've grown to cherish. Home felt even homier than ever. A couple days later, Jason asked if I was interested in sharing a response to a quilt, and I knew immediately which one. You see, my immediate love was not only limited to the art form and walls covered in warmth. There was a quilt that had caught my eye that first evening. The first moment that I saw it, I knew it was the one. However, putting words to this object of my affection, well, that has been the hard part. Why do I like it? First impressions might say loud and incoherent. It's hodgepodgey, confusing, follows no pattern. It's overactive, it's messy, made up of more than one unconventional material, including, some things that look kind of like burlap or flannel, It feels like it's off-putting. The shapes feel random. There seems to be a lot going on with no purpose. Well, yeah, that's why I like it. Exactly why, actually. The very existence of this quilt mirrors humanity in the most brilliant way. This one understands redemption. A bunch of broken pieces all getting by, all becoming something more. This one may be made from scraps, but it is by those meager means that a far nobler vocation is carried out. The imperfections in the mess assure you of your own fullness. The pieces may feel like they're scattered and placed random, but you're assured that no matter what, there is fullness. A complete incompleteness, perfect imperfections, redemption. Beyond that, this work is also politely prompts you that it is safe to use, because certainly it knows that it's not too perfect. It has an understanding of its shortcomings and can then become the most generous type of giver. It feels like home, a warm, enveloping home. One that wouldn't blink twice if I accidentally misused it, and one that is ready for me to really, really need it. I suppose soldiers are kind of like this too, huh? There may be broken paths, inaccessible memories, fears of what the world will think of us. This quilt contains a mess. It contains big open spaces that feel distant and unreachable. This quilt understands scrappiness, and it understands radical generosity. We all contain parts that we aren't proud of, but they are still part of us, part of our design. A soldier might understand containing hidden parts better than any of us. The memories carried home aren't really ones that fit into the square boxes of society. The rough edges are looked down upon. The loudness or lack of presence is misunderstood and shunned. If I were to drive along the road of a soldier's memory, I would stumble upon joyful belly laughs shared with brothers, big empty spaces that are shut off or maybe too painful to face. I would find fond memories of warm, warm souls. There'd be drops of red, maybe fear, deep love, anger, or passion. There'd also be rough edges and probable disorganization. But most definitely, I discover caverns of generosity. I think that to know a soldier is to love a soldier, because to know a soldier is to know that you are loved. You are chosen, enveloped, and accepted. None of us are meant for neat and tidy boxes anyway. We're woven together, unpresentable parts and all, intentionally. Our pain is purposeful, and a maker who knows that our meager means will glorify him is the quilter. I suppose this quilt can inform the way we approach strangers. In the same way that we understand our predictable and well-loved friends to be brilliant and kind, we've got to start believing in strangers' capacities for brilliance and kindness. There's a song I really love that came to mind while I was thinking about this quilt. The refrain goes like this: "If you're cold, go inside. If you're tired, go to sleep. If you're weak, come to me." Thank you.
Hello. Is this working? Yes, it is. Hi, I'm Natalie Hennig. The piece I decided to do my reaction on is Baptism, a New Creation by Eunice Woodberry. I have a guitar. I wrote a song. I like writing little songs, and I saw this piece, and I loved the concept of baptism being an art piece that is a quilt, that has something that is so intrinsically comforting and lovely. You know, when you think of baptism, you think of little kids. And the image that came to my mind immediately was when you're so scared of the dark when you're a child, and so you wrap yourself up in a blanket and then everything is okay. And that's kind of what we're doing too. So hopefully we'll be able to hear me. I'm just gonna kind of put this microphone in the general vicinity and it'll be okay. But this is called Swaddled. Wrapped in water, wrapped in word, a quilt of promises unfurled, warm and safe, and yes, secure. I am swaddled in something more. Didn't he stitch me together? Didn't he carefully choose all my parts and all my members? He made me unable to lose. Wrapped in water, wrapped in word, a quilt of promises unfurled, warm and safe, and yes, secure. I am swaddled in something more. This blanket of truth is oh so warm. I hide under it during thunderstorms. Imagine a cloth that can never be torn, and it's always, always worn. Wrapped in water, wrapped in word, a quilt of promises unfurled, warm and safe, and yes, secure. I am swaddled in something more. Cloaked in comfort, cloaked in cozy, tucked in spirit, tucked in hope, bathed in beauty, clothed in grace, snuggled up, and joy will approach. Wrapped in water, wrapped in word, a quilt of promises unfurled, warm and safe, and yes, secure. I am swaddled in something more. My grandma gave me a throw and put my initials in the corner. And though I love it so, I love it more to know that I'm swaddled in something more. Thanks.
Hi. Hang on, the mic is coming unscrewed. There we go. Hi, I'm Annika Doverins, and I am responding to this marvelous creation right here. It is called Crazy Work Quilted Wall Hanging, and it is by quilter Nancy Sponholz. How many of you know what a quilting bee is? More than I expected. Okay, very good. I'm going to explain it anyway. So for those of you that do know, you can take a nap. Quilting bees have been a thing in America since literally the colonization. They began as an effort to make blankets because there was a scarcity of them, but there was also a scarcity of fabric, of material, and so the women in a community would get together and they would collectively create the same quilt. They would all work on it at the same time so that they were using as much material as they could in as efficient of a way as they could. And the way that they would do it is they would all sit in a circle and they would face each other and the quilt would be spread out among them and they would all actively be working on the same quilt simultaneously. it kept being a thing. Eventually, they weren't quite as necessary. Times got less dire, and so it continued to be a thing, but it became more about community than about necessity, which in a sense, community is essential and very, very necessary. So it was still about necessity, but it became about connection, and the beauty of it is that quilts are inherently about connection. You're actively connecting pieces in order to make these beautiful creations that we see hanging on the wall all around us. What I love about the concept of a quilting bee, though, is that as it became more communal, it became more social, and it became generational. The way that it worked in the 1800s, I know that's a big time frame, but the way that it worked was that it was sort of a rite of passage for a young lady to be invited to a quilting bee. It meant that you had learned enough of the craft from the women who came before you, from your mother, from your grandmother, that they had taught you enough of the craft that you could now be inducted into this sort of society of crafters. And so you would get to go, you would get to attend these social gatherings, and you would become one of the quilters. I love the generational aspect of that. I love the communal aspect of it, and it is that concept that I was thinking of when I wrote this poem. What if all of the world is a quilting bee, and I'm making you, and you're making me? As we follow the patterns and stories unfold, we each become blueprints of legacies told. The stories we voice through the crafts we refine tell of heritage joyful and lessons enshrined. Maybe grandmother's buttons, antique handmade lace, are memories, the fabrics of wisdom and grace. What if each interaction is myriad threads, a colorful weaving, a glorious spread of shapes and of stitches until, in the end, we're so many pieces we can't comprehend the eternal extent to which we've been sewn by the quilters around us, by those we call home. As we are made manifest, artists in motion, we confirm our own love in our acts of devotion. Some lines are skewed, not all stitches quite straight, but perhaps what we love proves in what we create. In the hourglass sands of the seasons, the years, are sown all of our joys next to all of our tears. In divine transcendence of craft and of time, we're made carefully, lovingly, humbly sublime. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nora Kratz. I'm a junior here at Bethany, and I have spoken with Leonardo da Vinci. I'm afraid he couldn't be here tonight, unfortunately. I have spoken with him, and I'm willing to bet that you guys have too. Clearly, I'm not talking about face-to-face speaking, am I? Instead, I'm referring to something that creatives and writers and artists and intellectuals refer to as the Great Conversation. So the Great Conversation is a metaphor to describe the continuous, ongoing dialogue of thinkers and writers and artists and civilizations across human history about human and heavenly ideas. I like to think of it as humanity's heritage of creation. So God says we are made in his image, and he creates, and so I create, and we create. When I analyze the works of Walt Whitman, or Karl Marx, or C.S. Lewis, or analyze a painting by Da Vinci, or Jan van Eyck, or Andy Warhol, I come into conversation with them, a conversation that has been ongoing since the beginning of time, since the first creation. I have an idea, and I run into another idea, and there is an explosion. Neurons are firing, discussions are had, disagreements, progress is made, conversation is had. Conversation that is passed down from generation to generation to generation. It's a fantastic gift from God and a wild privilege to be a part of. And by being here in this room with this art and thinking hard about it, you become a part of the great conversation. Maybe more than you guys do, though, our quilters are a part of the great conversation. Today, I'm here to talk about the quilts of Ikuko Poetter. She made this quilt right here, and that one right there with the blue squares. And she made one down the hall as well that has little hearts all over it. It's one of my favorite quilts in the show. Ikuko, or Iku, was the grandmother of one of our art professors here at Bethany, Jason Jasperson, who just introduced the show. And as you can see from her quilts, she was also an exceptional conversationalist. Iku was born in Niigata, Japan. And you can actually see that in her work. So she would take her father's cotton clothing and sew it into traditional Japanese symbols in an American quilt format. So let's trace that again. So her father's Japanese cotton clothing into traditional Japanese symbols in an American quilt format. That's so cool. That's the great conversation, right? Ikuko Poetter passed away in 2020, and I never got to meet her. You'll notice at the beginning of my talk I didn't give a title for the quilts I'm talking about, because there is no title. We don't know what year they were made in. There isn't any sale price. We don't have a list of mediums or a pattern that she used to make her quilts with. All they are labeled with is her name. Her work is her work, her contribution to the heritage of humanity. So I look at her quilts and I think, what words was she trying to contribute to humanity's heritage, to the great conversation? Why don't we look for a little bit? I think beauty. I think care. I think an act of service. Maybe every quilt is an act of service, right? Closeness, warmth, love. Humanity leaned its ear close to the woman from Niigata, Japan, and asked, "What do you have to say?" And Iku gave them a quilt. Thank you very much.
It's a little dusty in here. Drying my eyes. Thank you. So at this time, we'd like to invite all of those respondents to come up to the banquet table and have our quilters join us up here too. They're in the room. Come on up. And it doesn't matter to me where everybody sits. It's maybe more fun if there's a little bit of interspersing, but that's totally fine. We've got name tags for our quilters, so later on in the evening, you'll know your celebrity's name as you come up to talk with them. You want to get this in there? Or no, maybe we're just going to pass it. So we have 9 people and 2 microphones. We'll have to play nicely and pass it down. The thought right now is that the great conversation happens right up here at the table. The brackets are the table. The participants are at the table. And later on, I'll just use my judgment as the evening rolls on. We'll open you all up to question and answer for anyone up here, because now we've got creative work coming from students as well. Okay, so you all ready with an opening barrage? Teri, I'm going to hand this to you, and you're in charge of the mic.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm very technologically savvy. I have a question specifically for Nancy.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
It's lovely to meet you. We haven't spoken yet. The note that you had pinned to your quilt when I first saw it said that the central doily was your grandmother's needlework.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
That's beautiful. That was the inspiration for the line, maybe grandmother's buttons and antique handmade lace are memories of fabrics of wisdom and grace. Was it your grandmother that taught you needlework and sewing?
No. She did make the crazy work quilt concept, and I have one of her quilts that dates back to about 1803. So that was the idea when I started doing the crazy work myself. She died when I was still in college, so I never had much chance to talk to her about the needlework that she was doing. But what you'll see in that whole crazy work construction is my collection of fabrics and buttons and laces over my lifetime. When I started quilting, I started picking up anything that I would find at a secondhand store or a rummage sale, things that were special fabrics, just because I liked the fabric. And if you know anything about quilters, we like to feel fabric. So I had a very large collection of things to work with when I started doing that crazy work. She made a crazy work quilt specifically for the comfort part of it. This that I did is obviously just for the enjoyment of the process and the collecting of all this lifetime of fabrics and buttons.
That's beautiful. 1803 that's amazing.
Yes.
What a legacy.
Yes, I have 5 daughters who are vying for which one of them gets to have the quilt.
I can't say I blame them.
All right, I have one for Eunice. I am wondering about, I love the sort of eclectic variety of the subject matters of all of your quilts, and I want to know where, how you choose what you're going to make next. Where do these ideas come from? Because there's a tarantula over there. Are those cells? Amoebas?
I'm not sure what those are.
Cool, I love it. And then we have baptism, and then, which is lovely. I love how clever it is. You have the interwoven fabric that has words on it, has letters, and then you have the water, and love that. And then over back there, then we have a sloth, and then what am I missing?
The sewing machine.
Sewing machine.
And the poem.
And the poem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So how do you choose?
I'm really susceptible to people challenging me. So the baptism one was for a women's convention, and the theme was a new creation. And so I went to baptism, and the idea that I could see in my head crumpled up newspapers on the street, so that's what the torn pieces are. Except back then they weren't making much fabric with alphabets on it. So I did what I could with what I had. And then the tarantula was a challenge. It was called Wild Kingdom, and I don't know, I like the spider web block. It's actually a spider web block in the background, the black and white. And so I thought, okay, I've got all this wool stuff. And the poem I wrote for my poetry group, and my friend said, well, it would really be great if that looked like one of Escher's pieces of work. I'm like, oh, darn. It took me a long time to try to figure it out, and I finally found somebody who sold the pattern and such. So a lot of them are challenges that just somebody says, why don't we do a quilt like this? And
I love it.
Okay. Give me like 2 seconds. I have a Do you want to go? Okay, Claire's gonna go.
Okay, my question's for Koleesa. Okay, so my question was about I'm not gonna tell you what it was because it's not that anymore. I read the description. I was like, oh, well, this makes sense. I don't. Anyways, all of your quilts feel so like homey. Like everyone I look at, I'm like, oh, I just want these all in my house. Anyways, I want to know what it feels like, what the process feels like what's coming out of you, or maybe that's too abstract, but I don't know.
I think I know what you mean. My quilts, I really like history. That's like the main inspiration for my quilts that I make. And so when I make my quilts, I think about if I was living in the 1800s and I was a woman and I was making a quilt for my family to use, that we would use, what would I do? How would I make it? And so that's kind of my thought process, I guess, in what goes into it as a reproduction quilt maker. And so all of mine are made with that in mind, actually, with like a homey feel of like, this is going to be used. This is going to be, all my quilts have been pretty heavily used. I had to wash them before I came because there was dirt on the back because they get used. And so I guess does that answer your question? Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready. I have a question specifically for Teri. Some of your quilts have very specific subject matter, and I think that's really cool, especially because quilting is a lot of times an art form that is something you create for someone else. And I want to know if there is any particular quilt that you made that you created for a particular person with a specific story in mind.
Sure. Koleesa, I have known Koleesa since she was a very small girl. My daughter actually rode with her tonight because they're very close friends, and her mom is one of my best friends. So the two quilts that you see up high, those are actually from pictures of Koleesa. When she was young, she did a lot of Civil War reenactments, and that's been a big part of her story. She met her husband at a Civil War reenactment. This one was taken actually from a photo. That was when you were getting engaged. That was their engagement photo. So when her hand is out here, she's actually holding her husband's hand, or her fiance at that point. And these two were made for her daughters when they were each 2. So, so those are from pictures of her, photos of her in her Civil War reenactment gowns. And the blocks all around the border are from a Dear Jane quilt of the Civil War era. And they're made using Civil War reproduction fabrics. So they're very much in Koleesa's style and of Koleesa for her daughters. And there's another quilt here that is actually Koleesa's also that I made, the sled dogs. That was one that Koleesa came to me and said, would you design a quilt for me to make? And I said, sure. And she wanted it of her husky plus a second husky and pulling a sled and in the mountains and with the whole Northern Lights theme. And I said, sure. And we got together and we spent a couple days and we designed the quilt. And then this last winter, she called me and said, can you do me a favor? I'm really busy and I'm never going to get this quilt made. Would you make it for me? So I made it for her because I love her. And that's what I try to do in all of my quilts, is I try to find something that the person I'm gifting it to loves and make it their story, not mine.
Can I just add? So every quilt she's made, and I feel like they're not, she's made like a bunch of quilts, and she always makes them with that person in mind. So if that person's favorite thing is books, she's made a bookshelf quilt for them. If it's games, she made this wild board game quilt where she paper pieced a Monopoly board. And so hers are always with great detail for the person that she's gifting it to.
I'm wondering more about, there's a lot of quilts up here from multiple people that have specific images of things. Instead of what you normally think of with a quilt is a pattern and a beautiful, lovely repeated pattern, or colors interwoven together that are all sort of interlocking. But then there are some, like these lovely women up here, that it's a very clear image. And is that process different? Is it harder? Is it easier? What is it?
Yeah. A lot of these that look more traditional often are a pattern that somebody probably in the 1800s created and it's been passed on. And you can buy patterns at the store. For me, I kind of got tired of that. But I think the hardest thing is I have an idea, but how does it look in fabric? Or I look at a photo and I'm like, but I don't want it to be the photo, but I want it to be the photo. And so how do I put it, how do I honor the photo while also honoring the fabric? And so I think in that sense it's harder. The hard part about all of them is picking the colors and for me making that first cut into the fabric.
Yeah, it's a very different process when you use a traditional pattern versus a design that you come up with kind of on your own that goes off the beaten path. For me, it's just a lot of head work. I think about it probably, sometimes it's very quick, but sometimes I think about it for months or even years before I put it to paper. And I am a big fan of graph paper. I sketch everything on graph paper. Like the ladies, they had to be done full size on graph paper in order to piece them. And so that it's just a matter of getting it in my head really clearly, and then I can put it on the paper.
I have a question for any of you guys, all of you guys. You guys keep talking about specific people you made your quilts for, or that they're constantly being used, stuff like that. And I feel like you always hear like bakers or chefs or stuff talk about that they love seeing people eat their food. So I'm just curious, what is it like? What is it like to see people you love using your quilts?
Once you make that quilt and hand it off to the person that you're giving it to, what happens after that is really not your concern anymore. Sometimes it's going to be cherished on the bed, and sometimes maybe it is there for the dog bed. You just never know. I have a favorite story that just happened this last winter or this last fall when the weather was kind of crisp. I have given lots of quilts to my grandchildren, and I got a text and a picture from my daughter one day, and she had this picture of two gals outside in the trampoline wrapped in my quilts that I had given them. And the story was that this was an overnight party, and they had gotten up in the morning and decided they were going to have a little time on the trampoline. So the best thing to grab was the quilt. So I told my daughter that was probably not one of the things that I had in mind when I was making a quilt, but I was actually very flattered that they thought enough that my quilt was going to keep them warm enough for that escapade.
I forgot the question. I had to make her retell it to me. I love people using my quilts. As I said, we use ours, the ones I've made all the time. So I enjoy it. I don't know, have anything to expand on that.
I think my favorite story of people using my quilts is I have a very dear friend in South Carolina who has triplets and twins that are 2 years apart. And I made the triplets all baby quilts that had 3 hearts, and then I made the twins baby quilts that had 5 stars, and they were each a unique quilt. But when I went to visit them when they were like 8 and 10 or 7 and 9, somewhere in there, they all came running out to me with their quilts, and they were thread worn, and they were so beautiful. It just really touched my heart that they loved them and they used them, and they were still sleeping with them even though they were too big to be sleeping with those baby quilts. So they got a second quilt when they turned 10.
I had done a quilt for my daughter out of flannel, which is a little harder to work with than the regular cotton. And she was in college and she had a roommate, and every time she came home, her roommate would be cuddled up in this quilt watching TV or whatever. And she's like, Mom, every time I come home, Jordan's got my quilt and I gotta ask her for it back. So we dug through the box, found enough scraps of the same fabric from that, and I just did blocks. It was nothing fancy. I folded it up and I went to their apartment, and Jordan was there all curled up in Kayla's blanket, and I had it behind my back and I said, really seriously, Jordan, you can no longer use Kayla's quilt. And she takes it off and she throws it to Kayla, and I bring it out. I said, because I've got one for you.
Okay, my question for you guys is kind of like, how much time do you spend with these, or is it like a side gig, or is it like, what do you guys, like, is it a hobby, or like, what are you, I don't know, that's, yeah, all of the above questions.
That's a question that a quilter gets asked all the time, is how much time does it take to put a quilt together? And I have never, ever tried to keep track of it. If you other quilters are like me, I probably have 4 or 5 projects going right now, and I move from one to the other. It's a work of art, it's a work of passion, and you don't ever think about the time. I want to just take a minute and go back to that question of stories about what happens with your quilts. Before I started getting really into patterns and the quilts that I'm doing now, I was quilting with the things that were my remnants from when I was sewing. And my Christmas was coming up, and my oldest son was 12, and I needed to come up with something for him for Christmas. His sisters always got doll clothes from those remnants of clothing, and I had no problem coming up with something for them. But this is a 12-year-old, and he's becoming adult. I saw a picture, now we're talking way back in putting quilts together here, guys. I saw a picture in a magazine of a denim quilt. This was before you could go into, there were no quilt shops. You could not go into a store, find a pattern. I had a picture of a denim quilt. And my mother had a box of pieces of denim, and that's what started me on the quilts. So the oldest son got a denim quilt. He took that off to college with him. He joined the Marines. He was in Kosovo. He was in Iraq. He was in Kuwait. In all of these different places, that quilt went along with him. And on one of his leaves some time ago, he came to me, and he's just kind of hugging this quilt. And I said, what's going on here? He said, well, can you do anything to fix this? The back was flannel, and it was just in shreds. And he wanted some repairs on it so he could drag it around, I guess, some more of his travels. I still see that quilt next to him in his study, next to his chair. His younger brother got a quilt, a denim quilt from me, about the same time in his age. He took that quilt with him off to college, and for the many places that he traveled and the different jobs. He ended up with his family in Ely, Minnesota, and if you know, it's a little chilly there. So I was there one weekend and in the living room and checking around for something to curl up with, and there's this basket of quilts next to the couch, which is where the family grabs something to keep warm. And in that box is also the denim quilt that I made for him. And I looked at it and I said, Mark, this is really pretty shabby. Why don't you let me take it home and I can put a new binding on it. And he looked at me and he said, Mom, don't you touch my quilt. They can be very, very simple quilts, but every one of them comes with a story. And as quilters, we absolutely love to hear the stories.
I actually have timed myself to answer your question. So like my quilt right there that has like those stars on it, it took me 72 hours, active hours, to hand quilt the layers together. So that's not piecing the front of it, that's just putting in hand stitches to put all 3 of the layers of a quilt together. It took me 72 hours just to do the hand quilting on a quilt like that, because I have actually time to myself. And so that doesn't include like how long it takes to piece the front. I never timed myself for that, but I do know that I put like 72 hours of hand quilting into one of those. So probably. I classify my quilting as a hobby. I'll let everyone else decide.
Koleesa's a young mom. We've all been there. When you're a young mom, you have much less time. But when you're older and not working, it's much easier to spend a lot more time. I spend a lot of my afternoons in my quilt room. So I spend a lot more time now than I used to. I used to be able to do maybe 1 major quilt a year. Now I can usually do 2 or 3, depending on the quilt. But some quilts take years to percolate, and others come together pretty quickly. So, and I've never really timed how long a specific quilt takes. The quilt that I'm currently working on is a king-size quilt. I daydreamed about it for probably a year. It's for my daughter. She wanted a very specific style, and she wanted to look like a palette knife painting of fall trees. And so I had to noodle it for a long time before I could figure out what to do. And I just started putting it together this fall, and I have spent 2 4-day retreats working consistently on just that. So at a retreat, I probably put in from 9 in the morning until 11 at night, so about 12 to 14 hours a day. And I've done that for 8 days, plus time at home, plus all of the drawing time. It was, it was 2 weeks on my table just to draw it out because it had to be drawn full size. Drawing a king-size quilt on your table full size is a fun thing because it's 106 by 100 inches. So yeah, it varies very much.
I think mine started out as practical. I needed bed quilts, and my grandmother helped me make my first quilt. And then it kind of became table runners and gifts for people. And then it became a hobby. I got pretty addicted to it. And now that I'm semi-retired, I have a lot more time for it. I have friends that are trying to get me to say that I'm not just a quilter, but that I'm an artist. And quilts have had a history of being sort of set aside as a craft, as a practical project, and not something that can go up and against fine art. But if you look at any of these, the beauty in them and the beauty that you all saw in them as you analyze them is evidence that it is an art also.
I have a question as far as the time, because we're talking about that already. It's very clear that the time does not matter. It's something that you love doing. But my question is about the decision to machine quilt versus hand quilting versus tying. When you get to that quilt front being finished and you're ready to put all the layers together, how do you decide?
Some of the decision is based on what you have at hand. I have a long arm machine. I didn't always have one. My early quilts, the large quilts, I sent to my stepmom, who was a wonderful, beautiful hand quilter, and she hand quilted them for me because I was a busy young mom at the time. At one point, my husband graciously said we could afford a long arm, and so I got a long arm, and now I do that, and so it's become a lot of fun to figure out how to challenge myself with different patterns. The dandelions, that was really fun to do with everything I do is freehand. I don't have a computer on my machine, so I have to sit and work out every stitch, where it's going to be. So, but Koleesa does more hand stitching.
It's always lovely to see what the long arm quilters are doing these days. There's some beautiful, beautiful quilting with it. I have always done all of my quilting under my standard quilting machine, and I do big queen size quilts, and the 2 very quilty scrap quilts back there are examples of what I've been doing under my machine. There was a time when I wondered maybe if I should think about a long arm, and I had a daughter who said to me, "Mom, if you send it out to a long arm quilter, it's just not going to be the same. It's not going to be your quilt." So I'm kind of stuck with what I'm doing.
I almost exclusively hand quilt all my quilts, especially coming at it from a historical perspective. Like, quilting machines have not been in existence very long, so when I make mine for the 1860s, obviously I hand quilt them for that reason, because it's an authentic way of quilting. But that aside, I have hand quilted a few modern quilts as well, and hand quilting has a very different feel when you like wrap yourself in it than a machine quilted quilt does. I feel like hand quilted is a little bit more like flexible, and sometimes it's softer, and so sometimes I like to hand quilt things just because of the way, I don't know, it just snuggles different, it drapes different. And then I tie some too, and usually the ones I tie are my just very utilitarian quilts, where like I'm not trying to make it look fancy, you just want to get it done and use it, and that's usually when I go for tying.
A lot of it has to do with time, money, and size. I just finished a California King. There was no way I could afford to have somebody else quilt it. There was no way I'd get it done myself. So I called the church ladies, and we got together and put it on a frame, and we tied it. It's just going on our bed. It didn't have to be, in public display. I have ones I've finished with buttons. If you look at the sloth and the sewing machine that are down the hall, that's all iron-on. And I really wouldn't have had to have stitched on it, except that it's not a quilt if you don't stitch it together. I mean, technically there's a definition of a quilt, that it has to be 3 layers and that it has to be stitched together. And debatable whether it has to be fabric or not, but that's a whole nother topic. So for me, it all depends, but I love hand quilting because it's so relaxing. And it's a motion like this with the needle. And it's just really hypnotic and relaxing.
Feeling like it's maybe time for some audience question and answer, so
Yeah.
I could steal this mic.
Absolutely.
Hands up if you want to get a question in.
Do any of you quilt only for yourselves and other people, or do you just sometimes make quilts just because you've got the time and you've got the fabric and you've got the idea and you don't know where it's going to end up?
The dandelion quilt's a little bit on that. I found a material, the dandelion material, I fell in love with it and said, I'm going to make a dandelion quilt. And it's for me, but if I find somebody else who needs it, I'll give it away. I make a lot of quilts at my church with a few other ladies for first babies, for people in long-term illnesses. And our quilt club in New Prague makes donation quilts that we give to the Sanda Anonymous in LeSueur County. So quilts go all over the place.
Right now, I'm basically quilting to try out techniques. And I guess they're for me in the sense that I wanted to experiment with the technique and I want to do something from my own head. But on the flip side too, if somebody wants it or somebody needs it, it just may go somewhere else, so.
I have 7 children, in-laws, 12 grandchildren, no great-grandchildren yet, but I started out giving quilts when they were born. I gave out quilts when they were moving into a big bed. They got quilts when they got confirmed. They got quilts, I'm talking about older ones now. They've gotten quilts when they graduated from high school and a quilt when they graduated from college. Now my youngest grandchild is 4. So there's a few of those milestones coming up. I have started making quilts that I enjoy and I love, and I think maybe will be perfect for some of these milestones in my children and grandchildren to come. And they're kind of collecting in my house. And I have a daughter who is assigned to hand out quilts because I'm not going to be around when my 5-year-old is married and is ready for a quilt. So I'm making quilts all the time just because I enjoy making them, and I'm kind of waiting and making sure that I have them to hand out to the rest of my family sometime in the future.
If it makes you feel any better, my great-grandma made me a queen-size quilt when I was a toddler, and I use it. It's on my bed. I feel like I quilt pretty sporadically. I'll just be like, oh, like that hourglass quilt on the end, I didn't have a plan for it. I just one day decided to make an hourglass quilt and threw it together slowly.
We have a question here in the back. Over here.
Yes. For each one of you, sort of 3 questions. Favorite color palette, material to use, and size to make the quilts in?
I tend to gravitate towards blue, but it's kind of what hits me when I'm at the store. I've gone to smaller ones just because I actually can get them done, and if I'm experimenting, I want to experiment as many different things, so that's why mine are a lot smaller than everybody else's here. What was the other question? Size, color, and... Oh, material. I use predominantly 100% cotton. It's kind of what's highly recommended, but I also just like the feel of it.
Well, I personally gravitate toward blues and greens, but I've made quilts in every color. My least favorite is orange, but I have made an entirely orange quilt for a Clemson fan. So to me, that's the ugliest quilt I've ever made. But the man loved it that got it. So I also use mostly 100% cottons. And did I answer all the questions? Size. I'm known for making pretty big quilts, but I'll make them any size. Whatever's needed. I've made table runners that are pretty small. I've made placemats, but I do gravitate toward the bigger quilts.
I like lots of browns and greens, I feel like, is probably what I gravitate towards the most. I use 100% cotton. I try and source fabrics that are specifically reproductions from the 1860s. There's a little shop in Northfield that she has like a wall of every era of American history, and you can pick which era you want your fabric from. It's really fun. So I go there and I get stuff. And then I tend to gravitate towards like a twin bed, lap-sized quilts. Again, I do a lot of hand quilting, so I don't want to do anything too big or I'll never finish it.
I've done an awful lot of quilts in the traditional 100% cotton quilts. I work mostly from scraps. I'm always so delighted that there are enough quilters who want to go into a quilt store, a quilt shop, and pick out a pattern and pick out these lovely fabrics and put together a beautiful quilt. And then they'll have a little pile of scraps left that they don't know what to do with. And these are the things that I'm picking up at rummage sales and secondhand shops. And again, when I point out these 2 quilts here and right in the back of me, those are all made from scraps that I've picked up that other people have decided they don't know what to do with. So those are the wonderful 100% cotton quilt fabrics that you find. Now, I've also started doing something different here in the last couple of years, and the big red and black one that you see behind you in the star quilt are both made from ties. I started out doing something with ties when my son and his wife were celebrating a wedding anniversary, and when they got married, everybody had the same tie company make the ties. All the fabrics were, or the colors were the same. So I pulled together all those ties from that wedding and put together a small wall hanging for them. And I had such fun with that, with the ties, that I started thinking in terms of quilts. And there wasn't much to find from somebody else that had been doing it, so I kind of just dove in and did it myself. The wonderful thing right now is I can pick up ties at secondhand stores and work with them as an entirely new fabric.
I forgot too that the tarantula and then the pink one at the very end, the hot pink one, both of those have wool felt on them, and that's one of my new things, which I usually work in small chunks because it's not really conducive for actually making a quilt that you'd sleep in, but it's nice for accessorizing.
Heading for my last question here.
Well, okay, first is a comment that it's, what's interesting about this art form for me is the expectation, it seems like from what I'm hearing from you, to wear it out, and that it makes you the happiest that it gets worn out, or that it's used. And so there's a real interesting nature, I think, to that. How many masterpieces are we so protective of that we want to make sure that it's preserved, and that's not the idea here. Which leads me to a thought about what is it about, you've also, that it takes 72 hours just to ply these things and hand stitch them. And that's not even piecing them together. And that it takes such a great amount of time to do this in an era where we think so heavily about efficiency, we think so heavily about not doing something except that it would earn us something monetarily. This seems to run so counterculture to what is going on in our society right now. I wonder if you guys would just respond to, is it joy? It's what motivates a quilter to do what they do, because it doesn't seem to be motivated by an immediate payout.
I don't think there really is a payout. We do it for the love of it and for the love of the people that we give them to. I feel like a lot is motivated by love. And I feel like historically, women quilters have always been that way. Historically, quilts as an art form have been to be used. Using it for the roof of your log cabin or on the back of your covered wagon. They've always been something that women have been trying to make beautiful and then just to use. So.
I do have a few quilts that aren't used. The My Town, My People quilt it goes on my wall. It took me years to think it through. Probably I spent a year drawing it and 3 years to make it. It's pretty intricately pieced. It's got tatting from a dear friend who's in the audience, and it's got just a lot of personal memories of my town and of my children's homes and my friends' homes and my homes. And so that one doesn't get used, but it gets looked at every day. And I walk by and it just makes me smile. But yeah, there's definitely, we have our own kind of crazy. We do it just for the love of it. I love holding, feeling, touching fibers, and I love the entire process. I'll talk to people and they'll have a favorite part of the process. I love designing. I love piecing. I love running my long arm. I even really love binding that last hand stitching around the edge that just makes it all come together. It's just a passion that, as an artist, you gotta do it. It's your art. It just flows out of you, and like Koleesa said, it's done for love. Most of my quilts are for people that I love, and I have a shirt that says, I sew a piece of my heart into every quilt I make. The song that you sang made me cry because it's true. I want to just wrap people in love when I give them a quilt.
It's an addiction. I'll be honest. Yeah, to go into a quilt store and just, I do order some fabric online, but to touch it and to lay them out, and I mean, why does one artist use acrylics and another uses oil and somebody else watercolors? Or why do you do photography? Artists pick. I've cross-stitched, I've crocheted, I do photography. I tried painting and drawing. That my husband can keep those skills. But this is the one I've gotten addicted to.
I just will reiterate those words that I heard from each of you, passion and addiction, but there's another phrase that I use, I quilt to keep my family warm.
I do also have one quilt that I don't use. As I was remembering that it's just to look pretty. My great-grandmother's best friend started a quilt in the 1930s, and she never finished it. And quilters have a joke about projects half done, that we all have one we've started and we will never finish. And so that was my gift to my great-grandmother's best friend, was I finished her quilt from the 1930s. And it is completely done by hand, and I should have displayed it. I don't know why I didn't think of it, but it's that one no one is allowed to use and no one else is allowed to touch.
Okay, I think it's time for us to wrap up this part of the show. Quilts stay on display for quite a few weeks here. We're done on the 21st of November. I want to remind us, too, that this show is conceived and curated in conjunction with the opening of the play Little Women, which opens tomorrow night and also runs 2 weekends. Get your tickets. I saw a preview today. Costumes are looking very much like these up above us. Could we have a round of applause?